He sat on the floor of a gas station bathroom, not because he was lost, not because he was drunk, because it was the only place no one would see him cry. He had just lost his job. His girlfriend had left. His landlord had slipped an eviction notice under the door that morning, and somewhere between the drive home and this gas station, he had pulled over because he couldn't see the road through the tears. He sat there for 11 minutes. He counted, then he stood up, washed his face, looked in the mirror, and made a decision that would change everything. This is Unstoppable Stories, and today, you're going to discover why the most successful people in the world never complain about what's happening to them, and what they do instead. Marcus Cole grew up in a part of town where ambition was treated like a joke. Not because people didn't dream. They did. You could see it in the way kids talked about basketball players, musicians, business owners, spoke about them like gods who lived in a different universe. The problem was the ceiling. Every time someone climbed a little too high, something pulled them back down. A bill, a bad break, someone in the family needing help. Life had a way of collecting on its debts before you even finished dreaming. Marcus was the second of 4 kids. His mother worked 2 jobs. His father had left when Marcus was 7, not dramatically, not with a fight, just quietly, like a tide going out. By the time Marcus was 16, he was the man of the house, not because anyone called him that, because he had to be. He worked at a grocery store after school. He helped his younger siblings with homework. He barely understood himself. He slept 5 hours a night and told himself that was fine. What he really wanted, was to build something, a business. Something real, something no one could take back. He didn't know what kind. He just knew the feeling, the hunger. But hunger doesn't pay rent. So he pushed the dream down, folded it up, kept it somewhere small and quiet inside him where it wouldn't get in the way. He graduated, got a real job at a logistics company, nothing special, but steady. He moved into a small apartment. He thought, this is the beginning. I'll save, then I'll build. And for 2 years, he did everything right. Then the company downsized, and Marcus was let go on a Tuesday afternoon with a box of his desk things and a handshake from someone who didn't remember his name. Here's what nobody tells you about hitting rock bottom. It's not one moment. It's a series of them, each one slightly worse than the last, until one day, you look around and realize you can't see the surface anymore. For Marcus, it started with a job loss. Then came the silences. The friends who stopped calling because they didn't know what to say. Then his girlfriend of 3 years, quietly but clearly, chose not to stay. He started applying for jobs. Dozens of them. He rewrote his resume 4 times. He wore his best shirt to interviews. He smiled. He answered questions about where he saw himself in 5 years. Rejection after rejection. Some never even replied, and slowly, quietly, a voice began to grow inside him. Maybe this is just where you belong. Maybe some people are meant for more, and you're not one of them. He started talking about it, not asking for help, just venting. To his mother, to a cousin, to an old friend from high school, and something strange happened. They agreed with him, not cruelly. They weren't trying to be cruel. But when he said, the system is rigged, they nodded. When he said, people like us don't get those opportunities, they said, I know. And for a moment, that felt good to be understood, to have your pain validated. But Marcus would later say, this was the most dangerous period of his life. Not because the circumstances were the worst, they were bad. But survival. It was dangerous because he was learning a habit. The habit of narrating his suffering instead of solving it. He was becoming fluent in the language of complaint, and that language, he didn't know it yet, was quietly sealing every exit wool they keyed. The gas station bathroom. 11 minutes on the floor. When Marcus stood up and looked in that mirror, he didn't have some great revelation. He didn't hear a voice. He didn't suddenly feel strong. He just felt tired. Tired of the story he kept telling himself. Tired of the weight of it. Tired of waking up every day and picking up the same narrative like a heavy coat he'd worn so long he forgot it wasn't his skin. Idro Velme sat at his kitchen table and wrote one question on a piece of paper. What would happen if I stopped talking about the problem and just worked on it? He didn't answer it that night. He just sat with it. But the next morning, something had shifted. He stopped calling people to vent, not because he didn't want to. He did. The urge to complain was loud. It was almost physical, but he made a rule for himself, just as an experiment. No complaining for 30 days. Not to others, not even to himself. Every time something went wrong, instead of narrating it, he would ask one question. What's the next action I can take? It sounds simple. It almost sounds too simple. But here's what Marcus discovered in those 30 days that most people never realize. Complaining feels like movement. It creates the sensation of doing something, talking about a problem, analyzing it, blaming it, mourning it. All of it mimics effort. It uses energy. It creates emotion. But it moves you nowhere. Silence, purposeful silence, creates pressure. And that pressure, if you channel it, becomes fuel. And this is exactly why stories like these are shared on Unstoppable Stories. Because the turning point almost never looks like a turning point. It looks like a quiet decision, a shift that nobody sees. Marcus started small. He had no money, no connections, no college degree. What he had was time. And now, finally, intention. He spent evenings learning. Not in a school, on a screen, in a library, in the corners of his day. Supply chain logistics, the thing he'd done for 2 years at that company. He started studying it from the outside in. Who needed it? What it cost? Where the gaps were. He sent cold emails. Most went unanswered. He followed up politely. Persistently. He got one reply. A small local business that needed help organizing their inventory and vendor relationships. They couldn't pay much. Marcus said that was fine. He followed up. He solved the problem. He asked if they knew anyone else who needed help. They did. Slowly, very slowly, a list of clients began to form. Not a business yet, just a list. Just trust being built, one conversation at a time. There were bad months. Months where he wondered if the 30-day experiment had just been a way to delay the inevitable. Months where the old voice came back loud and clear. But something had changed inside him. Not his circumstances. Those were still difficult. His relationship with difficulty. He had stopped seeing hard things as signs that he was on the wrong path. He started seeing them as information. Data. This approach isn't working. Try another. Not this life isn't working. The distinction is everything. He made mistakes. He mispriced a contract and lost money. He brought on a client who didn't pay. He underestimated how long a project would take and had to stay up 3 nights in a row to deliver. Each time, he had a choice. Narrate the failure or extract the lesson. He chose the lesson. Every time. Not because it was easy. Because it was the only move that led somewhere. 2 years after the gas station bathroom, Marcus had 7 consistent clients. He had a registered business. He had an assistant. He paid part-time. He had a savings account with more than $1,000 in it for the first time in his adult life. None of this was glamorous. He wasn't rich. He wasn't on magazine covers. But something in him had completely changed. The people who knew him before noticed it first. His mother said it this way. You used to walk into a room like you were apologizing for being there. Now, you just walk in. He stopped waiting for permission. Stopped waiting for someone to validate the direction. He had built something from nothing, not from luck, not from connections. And that knowledge lived inside him like a foundation no one could pull away. But here's the part of Marcus's story that matters most. It wasn't the clients. It wasn't the money. It was who he had become in the process. A person who moved toward problems instead of away from them. A person who had trained himself through hundreds of small choices to see obstacles as part of the path. Not detours from it. He still had bad days. Still had moments where everything felt impossible. He never claimed otherwise. The difference was, those moments no longer lasted, because the habit was different now. In the 5th year of his business, Marcus signed a contract with a regional distribution company, the kind of client that changed the scale of everything. It came not through a sales pitch or a lucky contact. It came because someone who had worked with him years earlier, when he was just starting out, had become a manager there. And when they needed someone trustworthy, they called the person they'd seen do quiet, reliable, excellent work with no fun. That's how it happens. Not in a moment. In the accumulation, his mother cried. His siblings called. Even people who had doubted him, who had sat across from him and nodded when he talked about the system being rigged, called to say they were proud. Marcus was generous with all of them, because he understood something they didn't. Yet, it's easy to celebrate someone's success. What's hard is believing in the effort that creates it before there's any evidence it's working. He had believed, alone, in the dark, for years, and that was the real achievement. Marcus's story is real, but it isn't a formula. Some people work just as hard and it takes longer. Some face obstacles. Marcus never did illness, geography, discrimination, loss. Some make every right decision and still don't get the outcome they deserve. The world is not fair, and no story, no matter how powerful, should pretend otherwise. What Marcus's journey offers is not a guarantee. It's a demonstration that the habit of complaining, while human, while understandable, is one of the few things guaranteed to slow you down, and that replacing it with action, even small action, is a choice available to almost everyone. Not a magic trick. A direction. Here is what winners understand that most people don't. Complaining is not weakness. It's a trap that looks like expression. It says, I'm responding to my pain. But what it actually does is keep you in a relationship with the thing that hurt you. It keeps the wound open. It makes the problem the center of your identity. Winners feel pain. They feel frustration and exhaustion and doubt, often more intensely than anyone, because the stakes they're playing for are higher, but they have learned to feel it and move anyway. Not because they're made of something different, because they made a different choice, repeatedly, until it became the only way they knew how to be. Your current circumstances are not your final answer. The rejection you're carrying is not a verdict. The failure you're holding is not a definition. There is a version of you that gets back up, washes their face, and asks a different question. That version is not somewhere in the future. It's in the next decision. This is Unstoppable Stories. Because every great success story begins the same way, with someone who decided that what happened to them would not be the last word. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Has there been a moment in your life when you realized complaining was keeping you stuck, or a time when someone's quiet, stubborn persistence changed the way you saw things? Tell us in the comments. We read every one, and if Marcus's story moved you, if some part of it felt familiar, subscribe to Unstoppable Stories. Every week, we bring you another journey of real courage, real failure, and real transformation. Because the story isn't over. Yours is still being written.